Okay, I've got with me Stephanie Davies today. She probably needs no introduction because I'm sure most people watching this will have seen her on Channel 4. I just mentioned that she was a senior coroner's officer for Cheshire Police and she was involved in the investigation of Lucy Letby. Recently, she has declared that this is very likely to be a miscarriage of justice. So I'll let Stephanie explain a little bit more about her background. But first of all, hello, Stephanie, and thank you for joining us.
Hiya, thank you for having me.
It's no problem. Um, so first of all, as I mentioned, just want to ask you a little bit about your background, how you became involved in the field that you work in.
Yeah, so going back 20 years, I had done a couple of bachelor degrees and a master's in the area of forensic psychology and forensic science. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to investigate cases, but because of my hearing disability, because I was born deaf, I could never become a police officer. So becoming a detective was out of the question. And so I saw a job advert for a coroner's officer down in Buckinghamshire with Thames Valley Police. And I thought that looks really interesting. And I'll do that for a year and then I'll decide what I'm going to do with my life. But I did the job and I fell in love with it. I found it so interesting, so rewarding. And I'm naturally inquisitive anyway. And I have quite a good manner when it comes to speaking to bereaved people. So I thought I've got a skill here. And then I ended up doing that as my career for many years.
Yeah, what exactly in give as much detail as you can. What does your work entail, and where are kind of your areas of expertise within that?
Yeah, so when I was first hit the ground running, so we're going back to 2006, February 2006, so it's almost 20 years ago. And I attended scenes of unnatural deaths. I would gather evidence and statements from witnesses. I'd visit families. I'd conduct identifications at the mortuary. I went to the mortuary every day to supervise post-mortem examinations on behalf of the coroner, and I'd be on call as well. So very hands-on. I would be in charge of my own investigations on behalf of the coroner. So I did that for just over a year, and then I went to Cheshire Police, which is more office based. It's not as much scene work this time, but I had built quite a lot of experience with Thames Valley Police. And then my role varied as I got promoted. And then I ended up, when I was a senior coroner's officer, I was then in charge of a team of coroner's officers. And they would scrutinise all the deaths coming through to the department on behalf of the coroner. I would say now my expertise lies in more to do with equivocal deaths and ambiguous manner of deaths and interpreting scenes of death, so crime scenes. That's where my expertise is now.
And how do you train to study equivocal deaths and the other things that you mentioned?
I think it's hard to answer. To become a coroner's officer, you have to have either medical or legal background. So for example, in our team, we have people with law degrees. We've had people that, start the path becoming a lawyer, and then they thought, actually, I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to do something else. We've had nurses as well, people that have done a lot of nursing. They, with that medical background, they can then make really good coroner's officers. For me, it was my forensic science background. I'd had work experience in with NYPD for a month. So I attended scenes of homicides and I saw how they investigated murders. And I was also trained in blood spatter analysis. So I had that background, and so I was able to bring a bit of a forensic eye to the team.
So,
But it's
so
hard to say how someone can maybe do what I'm doing now. It's been a long process, and there's no set standard. Um, I am working on a doctorate at the moment, so hopefully that will be the last of my qualifications.
okay, so you're in New York.
I was in New York, yeah,
Wow.
in 2004.
That must have been amazing.
Yeah, so I visited Ground Zero. The cops there were amazing. They treated me so well, and they took me to Ground Zero, which wasn't open to the public at the time. So I learned a lot about 9/11. There are so many unanswered questions about 9/11. So, and I started asking a lot of questions, and even the NYPD cops that were there at the time of 9/11, they said that some questions remain unanswered, and that's all they can say.
Mm.
But yes, I went to quite a few different scenes. You know, it was crime scene detectives, so they were police officers that were trained as crime scene analysts. So they had their expertise in blood spatter, blood stain pattern analysis. They would do reconstructions of the crime scene and then submit their reports. And I thought that is, I'd love to do that sort of thing. But there wasn't really anything equivalent in the UK. It was a case of either become a scene of crime officer, but that was more to do. You didn't have ownership of any individual cases. Or the other option was to become a detective, which I couldn't because of my hearing disability. So coroner's officer was probably the closest I could get to having ownership of my own cases to investigate from scene to courtroom. That was the closest.
Sure. So at some point you started working with Cheshire Police. How did you find that experience generally, and how did you find it initially?
Yeah, so I started with them April 2007. So that was over 18 years ago. And up until August 2020, I absolutely loved working for them. They treated me so well, and it's nice to get praise all the time. And I get phone calls every single day from senior detectives asking my advice on cases they were dealing with, and even cases that didn't fall with strictly under the remit of the coroner. They were suspicious cases, and I was asked by senior detectives to interpret blood spatter, for example, at a crime scene. And that wasn't actually part of my job description, but they knew I had extra skills that they could utilize. So no, I absolutely loved my job. I was really good at my job. And it was up until August 2020 that I loved working for them.
Yeah. So I think it's important to emphasize actually that, you know, firstly, you looked at an enormous amount of cases, didn't you? So how many cases have you worked on?
In Cheshire alone, it was well over 5,000.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind, a lot of those cases would have been reports from the doctors where they're saying this is referable to the coroner, but I think I can issue a medical cause of death certificate. So bearing in mind, so it's not 5,000 unnatural deaths I've dealt with, it's 5,000 in total, but that's in Cheshire. I can't comment on how many I dealt with in Thames Valley. But in Cheshire, I know it was over 5,000 because that's what was on our database.
Sure.
But a lot of the cases were unnatural deaths as well. So I would say the most common unnatural death I dealt with were probably suicide. So I developed a bit of an expertise in how to recognise genuine suicide cases.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to emphasize as well is obviously you're now a critic of the Lucy Letby conviction, but you've worked on many cases where someone was murdered and your evidence was part of that investigation.
I've not worked on as many murders as I would have liked because that generally suspicious deaths, the primacy for that is going to be detectives and police officers. So the
Okay.
coroner is almost sidelined, but I do have skills that are relevant for investigating murders. But that wasn't my role in Cheshire Police. It was more to do with the unnatural, non-suspicious deaths.
Right. Okay. So what made you want to speak out regarding the Lucy Letby case?
Yeah, so the reason I became interested in the case, I mean, as soon as I finished my review in May 2017, I didn't have anything to do with Operation Hummingbird at all. And as soon as I received my review back, it was returned to me inadvertently by Cheshire Police when they returned my office items to me. When I got that back, I started looking into it. And so that was July 2023 so that was during the first trial. And the one of the things I noticed from my original review was the original cause of the deaths given by those pathologists and doctors, um, and how they were so different to the new cause of the death that had kind of overruled those previous ones. And that was a red flag for me. I thought they're so incredibly different. And then I was like, well, what is the scientific basis for these new cause of deaths? How is it that they can overrule all this original work that's been done? And that was a red flag for me.
Hmm.
Another red flag for me was the notes, the confession notes. Was I try not to watch the news. I find the news quite depressing, so I tend to avoid watching it. But I came across this. I think it was on our regional news, and it's like these notes. They are proof that she's guilty. And I had another red flag, and I thought, hang on a minute, that doesn't
Hmm.
that's not very good, because these are subjective notes written by someone who was under investigation, who had all of these things being said about her behind her back, and she'd been taken off the unit, I think, at that point. And I thought, this is very subjective behavioural evidence. That is not tangible forensic evidence, in my opinion. And so I thought, if this is like, this is it, this is proof, if that's how they're treating these notes, then what about the rest of the case? Is that shaky as well? And so I started to form questions about the case. I mean, when the verdicts came in, I was surprised that Lucy Letby was found guilty, because I thought it seems a shaky case, but I accepted the guilty verdicts. And I thought there must have been other evidence at the trial that I'm not aware of that proves it. For example, I would have expected her to have searched on the internet different methods. There was no evidence of that. That would have convinced me that she was more likely to be guilty, but there was no evidence of that at all. So at the time I wrote my Thirlwall statement, I did refer to the case as being murders, because I respected the verdicts that had been given following the first trial. But then it was after that when I started to see red flags again, and that was the two press conferences. And because I had my review returned to me by Cheshire Police in their own data breach, I had that information in front of me, and I thought, something's not right here. This is a miscarriage of justice. And given that my review has contributed to Operation Hummingbird starting in the first place, I had a duty to speak out. It would not have been right to stay silent. And arguably, had I still been working for Cheshire Police, I probably would not have spoken out, because I would have lost my job. But I've already lost my job from speaking out about another case or another couple of cases that they dealt with. So in effect, I'd already lost my job. So the barrier stopping me from speaking out was really thin. And I thought, no, it's the right thing to do. My review has contributed to someone who could be innocent sitting in prison. It's right that I speak out, because my review did not identify deliberate harm. It just identified gaps.
Yeah, we're going to come on to talk about those gaps later
Yeah.
on. But firstly, I just want to ask you about how you felt when you started to hear and read about the expert panel's opinions.
Yeah, so the first one was the December press conference, and there was a discussion about Baby O and a procedure. And I was like, I don't remember there being a procedure. But because I had my review, I was able to check, because it had all the details that were reported to the coroner by the hospital. And absolutely, there was no mention of a procedure whatsoever. Now, arguably, the baby had collapsed, or it was part of a resuscitation attempt, this procedure. And I can understand if it's part of resuscitation, and really the question is, what's caused this baby to collapse in the first place? So I can understand that maybe that's why it wasn't reported to the coroner. But blood was drawn when that needle aspiration was attempted, and that's a red flag for the procedure having been done incorrectly or having gone wrong. And that in turn may well have contributed to the sequence of events that then led to the death. So arguably, if this procedure had not taken place, could the baby have been successfully resuscitated? So my concern was that this procedure was not reported to the coroner. Now, I don't know why that is. I don't know because I believe that the reporting doctor was not the same doctor that actually did the procedure. So it's a different doctor that reported the death. Were they aware of the procedure? We don't know. We'd have to ask them that question. Yeah, but I thought that is crucial. That is something the coroner needs to know about. And in turn, because the coroner did not know about this procedure, the pathologist had not had it highlighted to him either. So whilst the pathologist had access to all the medical notes, the pathologist is reliant on the coroner's officer's summary. This is what the hospital have told us. These are the key things to focus on. Now find as a cause of death. So, but they did not have any reason to look further at this attempted needle procedure. So I don't think I've answered your question there. What was the original
Yeah.
question again?
No, that was a good answer. A good answer.
Oh, the press
Yeah,
conferences, that was it, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So yes,
um,
so let's go back to that. So like you must have your jaw must have been dropping when you were hearing about this stuff.
yeah, I was horrified. I mean, I know it's disputed as to whether this procedure actually caused the death of baby O, but for me, whether it's caused or contributed, it doesn't make any difference. If it's contributed, even if it's played a small role, that would still mean an inquest hearing for baby O. That would have given the opportunity for the coroner and the pathologist to work out the exact sequence of events. And from my memory, from looking at baby O's post-mortem report 8 years ago, there were gaps in that report. So it's like the pathologist has said, this is a sequence of events that led to the death, but I don't know what's happened to trigger it all off. I don't know. And in the absence of any other information or evidence, I can only give prematurity as the underlying cause. And that's why I identified as a gap. I thought we've got missing pieces here. The pathologist is saying there's something missing from my information. And that's essentially what I concluded. It was because of what I saw, especially in I think it was baby O's post-mortem report and possibly baby P's as well. That was what made me say to the police, these deaths are not sufficiently explained. There are gaps, there are missing jigsaw pieces. And if the hospital are now saying we have new information and new evidence, we need to look into that, and then maybe these causes of deaths will be amended. So that was my conclusion.
Yeah.
Can't remember what I was going to say next. Sorry, carry on.
That's okay. Let me just clarify a few things. So firstly, I just want to be clear that we have the document from the Thirlwall inquiry where it describes this aspiration and it describes blood being drawn as a result of this aspiration. Okay, shut up. Just rain. Fine. Speak out. Quiet. Kate. Right. Do you need to go out? Go on.
Fair enough.
Right, sorry about the interruption, everyone.
No.
He gets excited by rain, so there's not even thunder. Oh, maybe there is. Maybe there is a little bit.
Yeah, they can hear a lot better than us.
She's gonna have to stay out there for a bit.
Oh.
So
Yeah, the procedure, I think it was a few months after the post-mortem when apparently the procedure was then made known. Too late. We have the post-mortem, I think it was done in June of 2016. And the pathologist produced his report. It would have been at least a couple of months later. So that information, I think, came out in November time, if I recall correctly.
yeah,
but I wasn't aware of it, and I don't think the pathologist was either. So why not give the information at the beginning?
Yeah, so there has been a little bit of controversy about that.
Yeah.
But in fact, both the preview report that we've seen from the expert panel and the comments that were made are consistent with this document. And also, it was suggested that when the aspiration took place, they used the wrong side of the abdomen. That's correct. I mean, I've shown that in the previous video, but I'm going to do a full video on Chardo soon. We know they aspirated blood. So all those details are actually confirmed. There is no controversy about this at all. I'm just going to let my dog back in. She's crying. Oh,
Oh,
Kate, can you come? Yes, you can come back now. Right, you're gonna lie down there. You're gonna be quiet. Good girl. So actually, there is no controversy about child O at all. Really, the controversy is why wasn't this reported to the coroner when blood had been aspirated?
yeah.
It can be very significant, as you say. So, could you? I mean, obviously, there's a degree of speculation here, but could you think of any good reason why that wouldn't be reported?
An innocent reason would be it was not thought to have contributed at all. So,
Hmm.
and it could be that the doctors that were involved with Baby O, they thought it's not a factor, it's not a significant factor, it's not relevant whatsoever. And that could be, it could be that they're almost blind to their own weaknesses. You know, for example, the aspiration of blood, they may not have realised, oh, that means the procedure could have gone wrong. They may not have realised that or recognised it. So there could be an innocent explanation, but a non-innocent explanation would be, well, if we inform the coroner of this will turn into an inquest case. That'll be closer scrutiny to our practices in the unit. Um, and we don't want that. You know, we have to have a post-mortem because we don't know the cause of death, but we're expecting a natural cause.
Yeah,
That's a more sinister reason. And I don't know which it is. I don't know which it is.
yeah,
It could be an innocent explanation. It could be a sinister one.
yeah,
And it's open to debate. It's open to speculation. We'd have to ask those doctors themselves, and whether they're truthful in their accounts is another matter. We don't know.
yeah. That's fine. So I want to ask you about your actual. See, at some stage you've conducted a 3-hour review for Cheshire Police of the Lucy Letby case. So could you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So from what I can gather, a letter was sent from the Countess of Chester to Cheshire Police. It was dated the 2nd of May 2017. And I am certain it was a Thursday that I was asked to go to police headquarters. So I think that would have been the 4th of May on the Thursday. It was in the afternoon. And I didn't know what this meeting was about. I was just told I was required to attend a gold group meeting. So gold group meeting, very high level police meeting.
Okay.
And it's basically to discuss strategy about what direction they're going to go in. You know, very high level. And I hadn't been to a gold group meeting before, so I thought this sounds really important. I'd only just been promoted to senior coroner's officer, so I was already quite, you know, I'd taken over from Christine Hurst, who was my predecessor. So I went over to police headquarters. I'm certain it was in the afternoon on a Thursday, and there was discussion about this letter that had been received from the Council of Chester asking the police to investigate. And the consensus around the table, there are a lot of senior police officers around the table. They were all saying there's nothing to investigate. There's no crime, there's no active crime scene anymore, there's too much of a time delay, there's no evidence of criminality. I can't remember the exact reasons why they weren't going to investigate, but it was along those lines. And the Assistant Chief Constable, Darren Martland, then turned to me and said, before we confirm with the hospital that we're not investigating, please can you confirm that these causes of death for the babies are explained? So at the time, it seemed like a straightforward task. And they said, we need you to report to us tomorrow morning. So, and I thought, this is Thursday afternoon. Generally, our working day ended at 4. I didn't get back to the office until after 4. I think it was 4:15, if I remember rightly. All my team had gone home. They all finished at 4. So they're out of the door by 2 minutes past 4. So I came back to the office. It was all in darkness because they turned all the lights off. And I thought, okay, well, generally the town hall building would shut at 6:30, but I could request to stay till 7. So I asked, can I stay a bit later till 7? So that gave me just under 3 hours to do a review. I had no idea how many deaths there had been in the time period. So I was looking at, I think it's from the beginning of June 2015 to the end of June 2016, so a 13-month period. And I'm trained in some software that helps you to extrapolate information from our coroner's database. So I selected some fields. So the search parameters, all children under the age of 1, so age 0 on our database as we go by years, who died at the Countess of Chester Hospital. And during that time period, and I found there were 13. So, which is higher than you would normally get. Normally you get maybe 2 or 3 a year, but 13 over a 13-month period was quite significant. I was able to then, I just populated all the information into a spreadsheet, and I added a couple of columns so that I could then look into the paper records that we had and also what we had in our database. The main thing I was interested in were post-mortem reports, because that is a very detailed medical examination. Some of the cases, it was literally a discussion with the coroner's officer. So a doctor saying, I can issue a death certificate. These are circumstances. And all deaths of children had to be reported to our coroner at that time. So Mr. Reinberg, he was the senior coroner over 2015, 2016. So all deaths under the age of 18 had to be reported, even if the cause of death was known and natural. And generally, as I was going through all the paperwork, I was looking especially if the parents had raised any concerns about the care. I was looking at the actual cause of deaths themselves, which were really on the surface all natural. They all appear to be natural causes. And it wasn't like the same cause of death each time. There were variations. Because pediatric pathologists are incredibly detailed in their post-mortem examinations. It's not the same as general standard coroner's post-mortems on adults. I mean, those post-mortem reports would be maybe 2 or 3 pages long. Pediatric post-mortem reports are 15, 20 pages long. They're incredibly detailed, so many different tests done. So I was looking through them, and I thought, I'm going to have to go back to the police and say that it's natural causes. There's no evidence here of anything untoward. And it was only when I saw a couple of post-mortem reports, and I think it might be for baby's O&P, and certain one of them was baby O, because there was discussion about blood around the liver, and the pathologist was explaining how this is a sequence of events, but I don't know what started it, so I can only give prematurity. And that's when I thought there are gaps here. I was really short on time, but it was a reasonably straightforward task. The police had already pretty much decided we don't want to investigate. There's nothing to see here. So I thought, well, I just need to answer their question. And I was expecting at first to say it's all natural. I don't think there's anywhere we can go with this. But it was those comments in those, I think it was 2 post-mortem reports, that really made me think, no, there are gaps here. There's something unexplained here. And so I finished off the spreadsheet. I didn't have time to write up my formal conclusion. I ran out of time. I didn't have time to print off my spreadsheet either. So the following morning, I went straight to police headquarters, and then I delivered my conclusion to them. And I said, in my opinion, the cause of the deaths for the babies are not sufficiently explained. There are gaps. There are missing jigsaw pieces. And if the hospital are now presenting new information or new evidence, then it may well be that those causes of death need to be modified. Now, I'd expect there would have been a loss of consultation with those original pathologists. Now, I don't know if that happened. I don't know, because I had nothing to do with Operation Hummingbird after I did my review. But I would expect, at a minimum, those original pathologists would have, a long conversation anyway, about those causes of death, and maybe going through the medical notes again, maybe getting an independent expert, a relevant independent expert, ideally chosen by the coroner and not the police. I think that may well have prevented this whole thing from happening.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that's clear. In fact, I can't imagine that anyone else of any even remote qualification would walk into the police station and do what we know Dr. Evans has done. And he's not like he said it once and then retracted it. I mean, he's doubled down on it on the BBC now, prime time BBC One. If anything, he implied that he decided in less than 10 minutes this time. So, I mean, I'm very doubtful there's any pediatrician or neonatologist that would walk in there and go, "Oh yeah, this is definitely inflicted harm in a matter of minutes."
Absolutely.
I think if they'd done what you suggest, we wouldn't be having this conversation,
No,
quite simply.
exactly. And I
Um,
think that that's one of the weaknesses. The problem is there's too much of a it's very dichotomous or very black and white in terms of what the coroner does and what the police do. If it's suspicious, the police take full primacy, bearing in mind the police do not know how to interpret complex medical information. Coroners and coroners officers do. Okay, they may not be doctors themselves, but they are used to medical terminology. They know about general procedures that take place. They know about expert witnesses in the medical field. And I really think if the coroner had had an active input into Operation Hummingbird, he probably would have said, actually, I don't think a retired pediatrician is appropriate. I think you need to be looking for X, Y, and Z. And you need to be getting the right people for the job. Don't be limited to this NCA expert list because it is limited. It doesn't
yeah,
include everybody. And sometimes you have to look outside of the UK to find a relevant
yeah,
expert.
yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the things in my opinion. The coroner was just pushed aside. Oh, yeah, I think the police kept the coroner updated as the case developed, but the coroner had no active input at all, which I think is a really big mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are several red flags for their due diligence. The first one is this guy's not been in a hospital for at least 10 years at that point. The second thing is they could have done their research on previous cases, and if they had, they would have found out that literally a case he just worked on, the judge had said his contribution was worthless, and
Yeah,
that he'd done the complete opposite of what an expert witness is supposed to do. And then the third thing is, in the conversation we're going to discuss later, if we get to that point, on the 15th of May, between Dr. Brearey, Dr. Jayaram, and I think it's Nigel Wenham, Paul Hughes, they say, not unreasonably, there needs to be a multidiscipline review done of the hospital. It's even debatable whether that needed to happen because they'd already been through several reviews
yeah,
and the executives were happy that there hadn't been any meaningful evidence, raised with regard to anything approaching foul play. But if anything was going to happen, it needed to be a medical body, needed to come in, highest level people, several different specialisms, and they knew that because they were told that. Now
yeah,
whether they can properly understand that, I don't know. But if you don't understand something, you Google it. It's quite a
yeah,
simple thing. You don't just think, I mean, I began this process myself knowing nothing. I don't think I even knew what a neonate was at the start. I mean, I probably could have guessed, but I knew virtually nothing. Everything that I've learned is just from looking it up or
yeah,
speaking to people that know
exactly.
more than me. So if they come in and say, we want to have a multidiscipline review done, then what you should do is think, what is a multidiscipline review? I'll find out, and then I'll make sure we do that. You don't
Yeah,
think, right, let's get any old medical expert we possibly can. Oh, this guy's turned up. Oh, he told us it's alarm bells should have been ringing immediately. They should have been thinking immediately, right, we need a second opinion. Because no,
yeah,
because they've had CQC review, Royal College review. They've had other internal processes. No one's pathology, obviously, coroners, all the stuff you've mentioned. No one's turned up anything that looks suspicious. This guy walks in and goes, it's suspicious. He's got a very obvious vested interest in doing
yeah.
that. They should have been asking serious questions.
Absolutely. And I think that it was almost like a blind faith because this magical NCA list, they're like, oh, if they're on the list, perfect. I mean, I was criticised by Cheshire Police for finding an expert in the States for
Hmm,
for different cases, which I won't talk about, but
hmm,
eventually I lost my job because I reviewed those cases.
hmm.
And I couldn't find a relevant expert in the UK. I had to look
Yeah.
abroad, and then I found one in the States. And but I was criticised at my employment tribunal for not going off this magical NCA list. But coroners don't go by that list; they just go for the right person for the job.
Hmm,
And if that means looking abroad, so be it. But the police, they seem to limit themselves to this list, and
hmm,
I think it calls into question, if there's an expert which has been questionable in the past, But I think it was because he was on this list that they've gone, he's perfect. He says he can do it. He's on the list. Perfect. And that is another error that I think that will come out of an eventual public inquiry in
Mm.
terms of expert witnesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really difficult question, maybe an impossible question to answer, but we talked about a 3-hour review. So someone asked me, could you give a date that took place?
Yeah, as close as I can. So what I do know, I've got definite evidence that I printed off my review on Monday, the 8th of May 2017. And
Okay.
I remember I printed it off and I put it on top of the paper files in a locked cupboard, in a locked drawer, um, by my desk. So, and I remembered I didn't leave the office that day because I'd done my meetings. The last meeting I had was on the Friday morning. And I remember when I came back from that meeting, I was really busy. So I didn't have time to finish off, tie up loose ends, so to speak. So I thought my last thing that I need to do is to print off my review and add it to all my paperwork and lock it away in case I need to see it again. So I believe that I did my review on the 4th of May, and then I delivered my conclusions on the 5th of May in the morning. Now, there are some meeting notes, because you did refer to some documents. There are meeting notes, but I believe that there is a typo. It refers to me being in a meeting on the 8th of May. No, that's not correct. It was the 5th
Okay.
of May. So I am pretty certain I'm right with my dates.
So the 5th of May is the initial Cheshire Police, Cheshire Constabulary meeting regarding Operation
The
Hummingbird.
4th. So I've been to 2 gold group meetings. So the
Yeah.
4th was a Thursday. I remember it was a Thursday, and it ties in. So Thursday afternoon was my first one. I don't know if they'd had any previous meetings. They may have. So Thursday afternoon, and then the Friday morning, I gave my conclusion, and then that was it. They hadn't made a decision by then.
So that's really valuable because we basically know the full timeline now. So basically,
Yeah,
what happens is the hospital write to Cheshire Police on the 2nd of May.
yeah.
They've already contacted you on the 4th. They hold an initial meeting on the 5th of May saying, we don't think there's any evidence. Well, they don't say we don't think there's
Yeah, well,
evidence.
the 4th they said that.
Right.
We don't think there's
Uh,
anything here, but double check the cause of death. And then the
Right.
5th, we had another meeting.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the meeting on the 4th is not minuted and included in Thirlwall documents. So that's something
No,
that's something that,
I don't think I was even sent a copy.
right.
From my memory, I don't think I saw any minutes
Okay.
whatsoever. So this is
That's
all by my memory.
that's fine. So then the 5th is the initial meeting that is minuted on Thirlwall, saying there is no evidence. Then you finish your review, we think, on about the 8th of May.
I printed it off, and I emailed it. It might have been I think it was the Friday I emailed it to Paul Hughes, and I got back to the office. And then I was really busy for the rest of that day. And then the Monday, I thought, right, just to close this all off, I'm going to print it off and add it to my paper files in my locked drawer. And
Yeah.
that was the only thing I did on the Monday, the 8th. I just printed it off.
Yeah. The main thing really though is that this happens in May.
Yeah,
I mean, you're very, very specific on the date, which is great, but the main thing is it happens in May around this time anyway.
yeah,
But it's happening before they've met a medical expert anyway. So we think about the 8th or the 9th, this review is done. Then on the 10th of May, the police get an email from Dr. Jayaram saying, I'd like to come. He gives them this review document I'm going to look at in a future video. Then on the 12th of May, the executives meet with Cheshire Police, and it is concluded from that meeting there's no evidence to have an investigation. Then on the 15th of May, they meet with Brearey and Jayaram, and that's when everything begins to change.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's literally exactly what happened. And then we don't know what date, unless you know, but we don't know what date they met Dr. Evans. We don't know if it was in May,
Don't
but it's
know.
looking quite likely that it would have been in May, but we don't know for sure. And then that's when everything.
Yeah,
So basically, what's happened is you've put your review in saying this jigsaw piece is missing, there's stuff missing, and then they have spoken to the consultants, and the consultants have told them some things, some of which are a few things are accurate and others are very inaccurate. And they've thought, oh, they pricked their ears up basically. And then Dr. Evans has walked in and said, oh, this is definitely inflicted harm. And that's how quickly things have changed.
Exactly. There was a press release, so I think it was a couple of weeks later when I was told by Paul Hughes that my review was one of the main reasons they decided to investigate. If it was the only reason, I would have taken credit for that in my Thirlwall statement. So when I wrote that statement, I was of the belief that they were genuine murders. So,
Hmm.
but his wording, I do have quite an echoic memory, but his
Hmm.
wording, he said one of the main reasons. So I don't know what the other reason was. I think it must have been the meeting with the consultant.
Hmm.
So he told me that, and then he was on his way to see the coroner, and I think he was telling the coroner we're going to do a press release, we're going to do a full investigation, we're going to do a press release. I was never told about the press release, but a few days later there was a press release, and it was massive. My team were quite upset that they hadn't been forewarned about this because they thought, have we not investigated these deaths properly? Now there's going to be a criminal investigation. Have we missed something? So I had to reassure my team, but I didn't even know that there was going to be a press release. And I think Dr. Evans, I think he heard about it in the media.
Hmm.
And then he presented himself saying, I can help you with this. And bearing in mind, in my experience, police officers are not good with interpreting medical data. They are not, in my experience anyway. So they're going to want somebody to help them shine a light through the complex medical stuff that they're dealing with. And I do think that they were in, a false sense of security, knowing that he was on this NCA expert list.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think had he not been on the list, I think they would have been they might scrutinise him a bit better. But he was on the list, so they thought he was pre-scrutinised. He was a
Yeah.
valuable expert to have, and
Yeah.
then it snowballed.
Yeah, I think a couple of things to say about that. Firstly, are that we should say in the interest of balance that clearly it's a very difficult case for them to deal with for all the reasons you've mentioned.
Yeah,
They don't have medical expertise, they can't deal with medical information very well. And then I suppose that what you've mentioned about the NCA list is a failing of the system. It should there be people on the NCA list that are described as a consultant pediatrician who are 10 years out of practice, basically. Um, it seems to me that they should have been knocked off the list by then. Um, I mean, there's stories. I spoke to Michelle about this. Michelle said, I mean, I've heard this before, but she clarified the details that Dr. Evans saw an item of equipment mentioned in the court case and he didn't know what it was. So how can I mean, in my view, he's just nowhere near the level of someone that should be in this court case. Even before we knew anything about him, of course, we know a lot about him now. But I think that as much as we have been critical of Cheshire Police, and I will be because I think they made numerous mistakes. That really is kind of a failing of the system because
yeah, I think so.
they just think, well, okay, he's on the improved NCA list. He must be an expert. He's a consultant pediatrician.
Yeah.
I,
And
I
and they
still
wouldn't
think,
think to question that. They wouldn't because it's the NCA list. Now I've got no idea how you get onto that list, and I probably wouldn't ever be able to get on it because I'm on the police naughty step for for the work I did on some other cases. So which is it's fine. It is what it is. But I think it is a systemic problem, and I do think, and I'm being a little bit defensive of the police really because they were in that false sense of security. He's on the NCA list.
yeah,
He must know what he's talking about. But the coroner, I think, may have had a different view because they don't go by this NCA list. They have their own method of selecting experts.
right, right, okay. Well, I mean, I think it's important we're fair. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't. I'm not here to bash anyone. I'm just trying to
No.
get the truth. So I'm not here to criticize the police unless they deserve to be criticized.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they are relying on the system like anyone else, and if there are systemic issues, that can affect them. And
Exactly.
I think they acted in good faith. They just made
Yeah.
they just made bad mistakes. And
Yeah.
I still believe fundamentally they should have done their due diligence. Not only should they have done their due diligence, but they should know. I mean, come on, like one of the most everyone's heard the expression "get a second opinion." Like,
Yeah.
has anyone ever not? There can't be anyone in the country that hasn't heard that expression. You can't just let someone walk in and go, there should have been alarm bells. They should have been thinking, but all these other medical people have looked at it previously and no one even saw any problems.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly. And I think they shared Dr. Evans's report eventually to get them rubber stamped actually, but you're introducing bias that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, like with the cases I looked at previously, not related to this case, when I went to my experts, I didn't show them my report. I said, I want to show you what evidence I've got, and I want you to tell me what you think, and then I'm going to tell you what I think. So so independently, they came to their own conclusions, and they happen to be the same as mine. So that is the proper way to try to get an expert opinion, and then to double check that opinion, and then without introducing bias. But from what I can see, with Dr. Evans, he was allowed to do his reports, and then his reports were shared
Hmm.
with other
Yeah, well,
experts, and then the other experts,
that's
that bias was
absolutely
introduced.
that's absolutely true. I mean, that's undeniable because it's in the Court of Appeal.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, so what I would surmise, I don't know, but what I would surmise is that Dr. Evans has guided that, driven that process, guided it. He's been, and the police have just, I don't know, but I imagine he said, "Oh, look, I'm just." We don't know I don't know if we know for certain how Dr. Bohin became involved. Obviously, previously had this guy Martin Ward Platt who'd been involved in previous miscarriage of justice for murder, but then after that, Dr. Bohin was involved, and I assume that Dr. Evans has been the driving force. And he said, "Oh, I've done loads of peer reviews. Don't worry, I'll deal with it." And the police have said, "Fine." I assume. I don't know, but
Yeah,
I just think
yeah, that would make sense.
I think it's
Yeah.
likely because how do the police know how to review an academic peer or medical peer review? So I imagine
Yeah,
Dr. Evans has
they
said,
wouldn't know how to do that. They
yeah.
wouldn't.
So they might have to prove Dr. Bohin, but I imagine Dr. Evans has said, "Oh, don't worry, just leave it to me. I know what I'm doing," and they've said, "Okay." I imagine that's what
Mm.
happened. Obviously, we know that there's no way that Dr. Bohin should be. If she'd have properly worked independently and not seen anything at all, not seen in the reports, it's highly, highly, highly unlikely she would have come to the same conclusions.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
Given that no one else agrees with them in the world. Um,
Exactly. And that it's fundamental. I mean, police forces, they do know about bias, unconscious bias and confirmation bias and peer reviews. You shouldn't be introducing bias. It's a case of, show the evidence and then share what your theory is afterwards. And it's just that was a major flaw, and I think the police do need to own that. They've allowed bias to be introduced, and they do need to own that, despite they may well have been overwhelmed by the medical complexity and medical experts, but they know about bias. They get trained in it, So I think that's a major flaw that they should have recognised, but they didn't.
yeah. So do you think it's I would know personally. I mean, I do a lot of reading, but maybe that's the reason. I don't know, but I would know. Right, this peer review should be blind. So do you
Yeah.
think it's reasonable that they should know that?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that, and I'd never
Yeah.
done any expert reports before when I did my review on the Wilmslow cases, for example. I knew I couldn't just give my report to an expert and say, right, what do you think? Do you agree? Sort of thing. It's a case of no, let me show you the original crime scene photographs.
Hmm.
Then I'll tell you what my theory is afterwards, but I need to see what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And that's how I did it. But to me, that's logical. And okay, I've never had the same training that police officers have, but I know that it's a big thing. They have to be careful about introducing bias, and that was a very obvious case of introducing bias. So it could well be that they allowed um, their lead expert to then lead the peer review process as well. That would make sense
Yeah.
because it relieves them of having to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about you've written a letter to senior coroner regarding your concerns about this case, I believe.
Yes.
So have you received any response to that?
I've received a couple of acknowledgements. To be fair, the letter wasn't worded in a way that it demanded a response. But I received two separate acknowledgements saying thank you and we acknowledge receipt. So, which is fine. I think the coroner would not be able to express any kind of opinion, especially with ongoing investigations on the Thirlwall inquiry. So, and I certainly wouldn't expect the coroner to express any opinions with me, a former senior coroner's officer. So, no, that's fine. Just the fact that my letter was acknowledged is sufficient for me.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'm going to try and do something that I've never done before on stream. So this could easily go wrong, but let's try it. Let's try and share my screen and see if this works.
I've got some documents available.
Okay,
Oh yes, yeah, yeah.
can you
That's
see
fine.
my
I
screen?
can see your screen. Yeah,
Right.
that's
So
probably
there's a
easiest.
possibility. There's a possibility that when this goes on YouTube, people will be able to see my screen as well. I don't know. But
Yeah,
I wanted to go over this document with you because I've cited this many times in the on the channel,
yeah,
and this is a full picture of the deaths that occurred on the neonatal unit. Of course, we know other deaths occurred on other units. For some reason, they didn't look at this death at the central labour suite. I can't see a good reason for that because they investigated these deaths. All of these deaths were
oh.
investigated that occurred in other hospitals, but they did not investigate this death that occurred on the central labour
I
suite.
don't know if that death would have been picked up in my review. Chances, because with my when I did my search, I just specified all children under the age of 1 at the
Right.
Countess of Chester. So it didn't specify if it was part of the neonatal unit or a different unit. I just captured all of them.
Right. So, given that I mean, so here it just says this baby was not the subject for a police investigation. So, whether they passed it to you or not, I don't know, but they didn't investigate. It's never clear to me why they didn't investigate, given that they investigated 4 deaths that occurred in
Yeah,
other hospitals, and they were going to charge Lucy with murder for child K.
yeah,
Child K is the infant where she supposedly removes the breathing
yeah,
tube.
yeah.
Infant died 3 days after she had any contact with the infant in obviously a hospital that's 20 miles away. But they still
Mm,
investigated that and they were going to charge her with murder. They only stopped, they only didn't. It was an 11th hour decision. I think it was in
mm,
2022, right at the last minute. They decided, right, we'll charge her for attempted murder instead. Obviously, she's facing a life sentence just for that infant alone. But
yeah,
yeah, so why they didn't look at this, I don't know. But anyway, so it says here 2 of the deaths that occurred on neonatal unit remain the subject of ongoing police investigation. But we see here the picture of the infants. So
yeah.
one of the things that I have always noted about this, you have these non-indictment infants here.
Yeah, in fact, I looked at this before and it's in the same, it's a very similar format. Sorry, I've got a cat here. It's a very similar format to my spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I guess they have their own way of recording data. So I think I captured the same 13 deaths.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So when I look at this picture here, there's, for example, child D, the conclusion of post-mortem is pneumonia with acute lung injury,
yeah.
ended up in the indictment. But if you look further down the list, um, where's the one that has pneumonia? Let me just see if I can find it. Hold on. Yeah. So here, this infant
Yeah.
is just completely ruled out of the case because
Congenitals born with,
yeah.
yeah, rather than
So
acquired.
what is that? I mean, that to me seems quite odd. And then there's another one here, sepsis and pneumonia. This one's ruled out completely. This is not an indictment, sepsis
No.
and pneumonia. But this infant here, pneumonia with acute lung injury is overturned. So
That
do you have any comment on that?
I mean, the only thing I can say, the congenital, the introduction of that word shows baby was born with it, so it was not acquired. So that could have been a reason for eliminating that one. But baby D, if I recall correctly, was due to have an inquest hearing later on in May, but Operation Hummingbird started, so that was then permanently suspended.
Right.
But I can't really comment further than that,
Yeah, no,
unfortunately.
that's fine.
Yeah.
it's just for me. So my view has always been it's obviously difficult to say things definitively because we don't have the full details of the non-indictment babies for reasons of privacy. So,
Yeah.
but if we compare this is 37 week in infant that
Yeah.
is pneumonia cited at the post-mortem. And then we have here a 30-week infant happens to be more premature, but that's not really significant because there's three full-termer infants that aren't in the court case. And this infant conclusion at post-mortem is sepsis and pneumonia.
Yeah.
The only difference is here that there's no post-mortem. So he's just like, so in that case where there's no post-mortem is not in the court case. But this
Yeah.
case here that cites exactly the same conclusion where there is a post-mortem is overturned in the court case. So things like that I just find to be extraordinary and I can't really see any reasonable explanation for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why baby D was going to go to an inquest hearing because looking at that pneumonia with acute lung injury, bearing in mind injury is not doesn't mean inflicted harm because you can have injury like acute kidney injury is when there's been some process that stopped that organ from working properly. So pneumonia with acute lung injury looks natural to me. But it could well be that there are other factors which meant an inquest was needed. For example, maybe the family felt an inquest was needed. Maybe they had concerns with the care. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, so child
I don't know
D's.
the details, but that would be a logical reason, I think, for an inquest hearing for a cause of death that is potentially natural. They may have argued that the cause of death was preventable, and that can necessitate an inquest hearing. So that would make sense.
Yeah, so I forget what the position the parents was. This may be the infant where the parents did want an inquest, but this is definitely 100% an infant where the quality of care was criticised, the
How
mistakes
was
were
that?
made. Yeah,
Okay, that makes sense then, yeah, because
yeah,
I don't know for certain that the care was criticised, but that makes sense. That's just from seeing that going to potential inquest. And for what appears to be a natural cause of death, that's the main reason if the family are concerned with the care and that the death could have been prevented.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's a significant case, really. Well,
yes,
they all are, but that is quite a significant case.
yes. And then the other document I have is this one. So um,
Oh,
this goes through the infants that ultimately were in the indictment. So when we're gonna try to look at the 15th of May meeting later in this discussion,
okay.
if we get that far. So I can't keep you all day, but basically in that 15th of May meeting, the consultants from the Council of Chester give an impression related to the infants that they were all fine, they're all 32 weekers plus. But then when you actually look at this report, the first infant's 31 weeks, the second infant's 30 weeks. Child D, there were major problems with care. Child E's 29 weeks. All these other infants are knocked out. We've got 27 weaker, and there's a
Mm,
load knocked out. Then there's child O, where this child had a massive gastrointestinal bleed. Everything points to that being a gastrointestinal bleed. And then there's child P, at least that child is actually 33 weeks, but then it's a triplet. And then
yeah,
the triplet. These are complex cases. So I think the picture that was given to the police by the consultants was completely misleading. But they had this report where it's available, and they ended up ruling out all of these other cases. But when you actually look at the cases that are left, that they don't fit the picture that was described at all. Look at all these ones that are ruled out. And then it's still
yeah,
31 weaker.
exactly.
There's virtually nothing left. There's virtually nothing left that actually fits the description from the 15th of May. So this is the kind of thing that should have been a
Mm,
red flag, in my view.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes sense.
So do you have any further comment other than what I've said?
I think, I mean, we don't know the full details of the selection process as to why, you know, babies were eliminated, deemed not suspicious, and I don't think I want to know the process. But the most logical thing would be to look at all cases look at the care for all cases,
Yeah.
not hand pick, cherry pick, actually these ones, and if they've done it to coincide with when Lucy Letby was on duty, then that's a red flag in itself. And that's again introducing bias. But a key thing would be to look at all of them, and I really think if if there was any way that the panel for the new defence, if they could look at the other cases, they may identify poor medical care and missing jigsaw pieces in those cases as well. But I don't think they'll have access to those medical records because they weren't on the indictment. So, but a proper way of looking at a cluster to look at everything, not cherry pick certain cases because of a predetermined narrative, and that so yeah, I find that concerning. And you're right, originally they were looking at quite a lot, but then so many have been not relevant, not part of this. And I find it concerning. So who's made that decision? These babies are definitely not, murdered or had inflicted harm. How did they make that differentiation? And who made that decision? Was that their lead expert witness who stands to get a lot of money as the more reports he does, or what? It's I mean I know I wasn't at the trial. I wasn't part of Operation Hummingbird after I did my review. I haven't scrutinised all the Thirlwall documents, so there may be things there that I'm missing. But my impression is that the whole process of selecting what deaths were definitely suspicious, that's not being transparent. And public inquiry, it has to be transparent. So yeah, I personally have a lot of questions about that selection process and why some babies didn't make the indictment and why some babies did.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well as transparency, the other word that comes to mind is competent. Has it been competent? Obviously, in my
Yeah,
estimation, it hasn't been competent, but it's really, I think today we'll miss out the looking at the meeting and stuff because I want to ask you some other questions, and you can always come back and discuss that later, and I'll
sure.
put the full timeline together, and we'll go over
Okay.
all of that. But I think that it's clear to me that the 15th of May meeting, the police have been given an impression that if you actually look at what went in the court case compared to what they were told, there's no comparison. So I just I can't understand how they allowed that to happen because on the 12th of May they're saying right there's not going to be an investigation, and then on the 15th of May two consultants walk in and they basically just allow them to I mean, and also there's so many things. I mean, they should have been under suspicion. That they should have known about the grievance procedure. They should have known that Brearey and Jayaram were, particularly Brearey, were instrumental to the grievance procedure. So they absolutely identified Lucy Letby in that meeting. There's no doubt. You couldn't come away from it thinking anything else. So surely at that point the police should be thinking, well, should have done some investigation or something. It just seems incredible that they went within a matter of days. Within a few days, they went from right, we're not investigating to right, we're by the 18th of May, that it's in the Guardian. On the 12th of May, they weren't going to investigate at all. Within 6 days, they made it public.
Exactly. And I think again the role of the doctor, it commands respect. And I do think, given the lack of medical training that police officers have generally anyway, or that, they're the weaknesses in their ability to interpret complex medical data. They had to be guided by doctors. They had to be, and I think again, I think there was a form of bias there, but it was unconscious bias. So they took the word of the doctors as, almost treating it as fact. So these are very intelligent clinicians who are saying, we have no idea what's caused these deaths, but the only thing we can come back with is deliberate harm, and we have a suspect. So that's guided the police. So the police were led by the doctors, partly because they think that doctors are not going to lie to them. Doctors,
Hmm.
they've said, we invite scrutiny. We've got no idea what's causing these deaths. So, but just like there's blind faith in Dr. Evans, I think there's blind faith in these consultant paediatricians, and they help to lead the investigation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult to say at the time. I think having those expert, having doctors with that medical knowledge definitely would have helped the police. But in hindsight, looking back, I hope that the police recognise that they probably did give a bit too much power to these doctors. And, they should have probably asked more questions. Are these the right people? Maybe we should be getting second opinion, or maybe we should be, if there's excess deaths on a unit, does it have to be a nurse? Could it be related to the doctors and the decisions they've made? And we don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know that, because no one wants to ever admit that they've made mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a problem to get people to admit they made a mistake.
Yeah.
Um, so the next question I want to ask you, you've kind of touched upon this already, but I'd be really interested to get your view on this. So a lot of people, including myself, and a lot of people that are a lot more qualified than me, look at this case and they think, well, we've had post-mortem reports, we've had pathologists, we've had coroners. Obviously, there have been other reviews as well, but particularly, usually these things would not be overruled on the basis of what was provided here. So how was that? How was it possible for that to happen, firstly?
I definitely can't answer that, but I'm quite horrified that it was allowed to happen. Um, See, I don't know if the parents have now got new death certificates with a new cause of death on saying air embolism.
Hmm.
But I'm quite horrified that that's been allowed to happen, and I don't know what the process was for determining that those original reports, those original professionals were all wrong, and then we've got this now it's the CPS and the police saying, well, we've got our own expert, and that's now more important than what was done before. I'm quite horrified, and I do wonder if some areas of law have been breached there. But I'm not a lawyer, so I can't comment on that. And I guess if it was determined through a criminal trial, and the judge was like, yes, these are the cause of death. So I don't know. Again, I wasn't at the trial, so I can't comment. Then does that take precedence because it's beyond reasonable doubt? I don't know. This is an area of law that I'm not familiar with, but I'm horrified that it was allowed to happen, especially with everything we know now. And a future public inquiry would have to have a look at that, because I think there will end up being another public inquiry. I mean, yet more public money will be spent on this case, but we need to get it right.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that could have happened, and I don't know if there was ever consultation done with the previous coroners, with the pathologists, with the other experts that were involved, or if it was just accepted as facts in court. These are now the cause of deaths. Everything else is rubbish.
Well, I think we can say quite confidently that the pathologists and coroners weren't
I
uh,
don't think so.
consulted because they didn't appear in court. What their view was literally just overruled.
Yeah.
Um, would it be usual? We're not privy to everything the police did, obviously. I think we are privy to a lot, but when they obviously keep things quiet, which is fair enough under certain circumstances. But assuming that they didn't interview the pathologists and coroners, which we think is true, um, can you see any? Would it be normal to do that?
Um, from the coroner's perspective, no. I mean, for example, if there is a cause of death that maybe is disputed, let's say there's a cause of death on a, say, given by pathologists, and there's something contributing to the death, but the family dispute it, and maybe they get their own expert, and then they discuss it at an inquest, which is an inquisitorial process. The coroner, being a judge, an independent judicial officer, could then rule, actually, I think what's written in part two as contributing to the death, I think that can be removed considering the evidence we've heard in court today. And then they'll generally do that with agreement with the pathologist, who will also hear this evidence and say, on reflection, yes, I think the direct cause of death stays the same, but I'm happy to amend part two and to take that bit out because it's not contributed. Now I know what's been discussed at the inquest. That would be a process that's typical for an inquest setting where the cause of death may be in dispute. Now, I don't know if something similar happened at this trial. I suspect not, especially if the original pathologists were not involved, because that would generally be a conversation between the judge and the original pathologist, at least in an inquest setting. So how it was determined that these new causes of death are superior, I've got no idea, and I'm very concerned that there are areas of law that have been breached.
Fair comment. So I'll ask you a question. So you interviewed by Sonia Poulton recently, and you expressed a similar view to mine regarding the consultants. So essentially, there are three possibilities with the consultants. The first one is that they deliberately targeted Lucy Letby from day one, or very early on anyway. The second possibility is they started out with genuine concerns and then it evolved into something more targeted. And the third possibility is they, which is essentially my view, is that in some respects they behaved very badly, but they believe what they were saying. So I think you gave your view to Sonia. So I'd love to hear you explain or express what you believe.
Yeah, so I can see both points of view. I'm not convinced that from the very outset they were like, right, we're really crap as doctors. We're things are going wrong here, but we don't want to take the blame. Right there, how about her? Let's pick on her. And I'm not convinced that that happened. I actually do wonder if there's a little bit of blindness on the part of the doctors on maybe their own weaknesses as clinicians, and maybe they were genuinely. We've got no idea why we're having so many deaths. We don't know what the problem is, and it could be an inability to self-reflect, to recognize their own flaws, and to think, well, I'm a doctor, I know everything, and ego plays a role. So, well, it must be the fault of one of the team lower down than us, not us, because we know everything about medicine. It must be one of the more junior staff. And it won't have helped with the grievance being upheld that Lucy Letby put in against her accusers. So, already they're going to see her in a negative light. And it may well be that she was there a lot. And then a seed was then planted and then watered. And then it grew arms and legs and then just went completely out of control. So, and I'm also not convinced that if the doctors were aware of their own failings and weaknesses, if they really would want to invite close scrutiny, knowing that their weaknesses would then be exposed. So it could well be that they were in an impossible situation and thought we've got no choice now. It's going to get really bad for us. We're going to have to involve the police, and let's hope that they will agree with us as it's a nurse. And so that is very possible, but I'm not seeing any compelling evidence that that's exactly what happened, that they conspired from the outset, recognizing their own flaws and then deliberately targeting a more junior member of staff. I'm not convinced by that. Often when you've got two opposing sides, usually the truth is somewhere in the middle. And it may well be that over time they realise actually there's not any evidence. So we need to make it look like there's evidence. We need to pique the interest of the police. At that point, maybe they were starting to be aware, actually, we are naming this person, but it sounds like they may have shaped it or presented it in such a way that the police have gone, you know what, we will investigate. So at that point, maybe, but at the very, very beginning, I'm not convinced. No one really knows for certain.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's impossible to say, as you rightly say. I mean, I basically have the same view as yourself. So, um, well, the one thing I will say is that I've spoken to lots of healthcare professionals, and people who work within the NHS and people who are healthcare professionals, who I know, some that I know quite well now, and whose view I respect, they think that they were targeted. She was targeted, and they say that because of the culture in the NHS and what they've experienced previously. And I must say, even in my short time of doing YouTube and also seeing other channels, the number of times that someone comments and says, "I'm not even surprised this happened," is quite chilling, I think.
It is. Yeah.
Because you hope that hospitals, a caring profession it should be, you hope that the culture within them and within the organization is, somewhat positive, not toxic to the degree that I've heard. And
Yeah.
not heard from one person, like heard repeatedly. So that is obviously the thing that makes me doubt my own view.
Yeah.
But we can't say for sure. All I can say is that I let anyone say whatever they want, and I respect everyone else's view, and
Yeah.
I can easily be wrong. Um,
And the same mindset. It
yeah,
absolutely, I don't think we'll ever know for certain. But I can see both perspectives.
yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. I'm not seeing any convincing evidence that really sways me one way or the other. But I do think from the very start, they were mystified as to why they had all these deaths.
Mm.
And then over time, when they really want the police to get involved, they then kind of shaped their narrative.
Mm.
Then I would say that they deliberately shaped their narrative to point the finger. Then I would say was the point. So yes, so she would have been a scapegoat, but I'm not wholly convinced that that happened at the very outset.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, I completely agree with that. But they can shape the narrative while still believing that they're correct. That's the thing.
Yeah,
They can still
yeah,
believe that there's something very strange going on, that it could be a malignant behavior, or
yeah,
also behave in a
exactly.
way that is not professional, clearly, in my view.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you we're going to talk about things that Cheshire Police have said about Stephanie, which have not been particularly favourable.
No.
Um, so let me tell you something firstly that I haven't told you previously. So obviously when I'll read out what they said. So um, firstly, a Cheshire Police spokesperson described Davies' former, this is in The Guardian, former position as an administrative role within the Cheshire Coroner's Office, and that she was neither formally medically nor legally trained. So I read this before I spoke with you, or before I met you, and obviously, I can see straight through this. I mean, it goes on to say a disciplinary hearing in February 2023 found allegations of gross misconduct by Stephanie Davies, unrelated to Lucy Letby case, to be proved. And had she not already resigned, she would have been dismissed without notice. So we're not going to discuss that today, but that's just smear tactics. And then Cheshire Constabulary strongly refute the credibility of these claims. So if we leave out the middle part and we just look at the two comments, firstly, they
Yeah,
claim that you have an administrative role within the Cheshire Coroner's Office. So I think we've put that to bed today completely, firstly. And as for not being formally medically or legally trained, firstly, that applies to the police. And secondly, Stephanie has got a master's degree and, is very well qualified and very experienced. And then on top of that, um, they don't, the key thing to note is they don't say anything, they don't say, if you'd have gone out, if you'd have gone to Channel 4, or if you'd have gone to The Guardian, and if you'd have said things that are untrue, they would have come down on you like a ton of bricks, obviously.
yeah,
So they don't say Stephanie said things that are untrue, or Stephanie's version of events are incorrect, or Stephanie is a liar, or anything like that.
no,
They just try to engage in some smear tactics, and we
yeah,
refute the credibility of these claims. We know these claims are true because if these claims weren't true, you would have actually refuted the details of those claims. But as you've made
yeah,
no effort to do that whatsoever, we know that what Stephanie's saying is true. So I wanted to mention
yeah.
that firstly. And then I just wanted to show people as well. Let me see if we can share the screen again.
Oh yeah, I think I know. Yeah, there is proof that's published on Thirlwall that actually the police did ask me to do more than be an administrator.
Yeah. So here,
Yeah,
did you know about this?
yeah, I did. This is actually one of my exhibits. To be fair, I included it because I thought Thirlwall needed to see it. When I did the statement for Thirlwall, I predicted that Cheshire Police would try to tarnish my expertise, say she was a nobody, we didn't ask her to do a review of 13 deaths, she's lying. And I thought they would, and I thought, this was part of the bundle of documents that they gave to me. after my employment had ended. And I thought this is exactly what I was asked to do. I was asked to comment on scenes of death and do blood spatter analysis, to help the senior investigating officers when they had an ambiguous case. So I thought I only really included that for Thirlwall's attention. I'm surprised that they actually decided to publish it, but this does prove that Cheshire Police have lied in that sweeping statement they made about me. And I have now submitted a formal complaint to the IOPC because a public organisation should not be making falsified, sweeping statements about, people that used to work for them. I know they're very, very bitter that my other case reviews, I found they made a lot of mistakes. And because my report was then leaked by a third party without my knowledge or permission, I inadvertently embarrassed them in the public eye because the media took my conclusion seriously. So to have them do this, this is my exhibit. I actually predicted they would do this. I thought they would do that when they saw my Thirlwall statements, but turns out they did exactly as I predicted, but after I was approached by The Guardian and Channel 4 News. But the evidence is there in black and white. My role was quite substantial and even going beyond the remit of a typical senior coroner's officer's role.
Yeah. So what I'd say to what you just said is they're going to have to get used to being embarrassed because there's going to be a lot more embarrassment to come. But I sort of mention this thing here. So this is a meeting, I believe, from 2018. Let's
yeah.
the top. 11th of July 2018. So is this post Lucy's arrest? Lucy was arrested, yes, 3rd of July. This is just after Lucy was arrested. So Lucy was arrested for the first time 3rd of July 2018, so just after it.
So bearing in mind that the initials SB does refer to Simon Blackwell, who became the strategic lead of Operation Hummingbird. So this was him that made the comment, and at the time he was the head of the major investigation team for Cheshire Police.
Right. So Simon Blackwell, as Stephanie just mentioned here, is reminded all managers the breadth of Stephanie Davies' knowledge in regards context of death, especially, and impressed by Stephanie Davies' recent involvement at scene of work on blood pattern analysis. And she's reporting here, Stephanie's reporting here on the introduction of all deaths to be scrutinised, etc., etc. So she's playing quite a significant role in this meeting. And also, of course, it's worth mentioning you've been working for a decade with the police by this stage and worked on many, many cases. So the statement that they've made, we can just throw in the bin, basically. But I just wanted to make sure people saw this so that they know.
Thank you.
So it's there now. So just a couple of questions to finish with. So firstly, I believe you've written to the Thirlwall inquiry attempting to update your statement. Now, I think I know the answer to this question, but have you heard anything back from them?
No, nothing, not even an acknowledgement. I mean, bearing in mind this is the summer period, maybe they don't answer any of their emails until, September. So maybe I'll get something. But in the past, every time I've contacted them, the same people, I've always had an acknowledgement. So this is the first time I've not had an acknowledgement. Maybe it will come, but maybe it won't.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's what I expected, of course. And then lastly, when you spoke to The Guardian, you said the following: the new experts' medical explanations make sense to me. They have filled the gaps I saw when I did my review, much more than the police and prosecution case against Lucy Letby. I stand by the review I did because I reported that there were gaps, but I feel almost guilty that it contributed to a police investigation being started, which led to convictions that I now believe are unsafe and a miscarriage of justice. So as you sit here today, would you like to describe your position on Lucy and the conviction?
Yeah, so I do stand by my original review and my conclusions, albeit it was a very short time that I had to do it. But from everything that I've seen, it's absolutely an unsafe conviction. And I now believe that Lucy Letby is likely innocent. And generally, I'd be cautious about saying that about individuals. I'd feel more comfortable saying whether a conviction is looking to be safe or not. But I went from this is looking unsafe to she's now looking to be innocent. There's insufficient evidence that proves guilt. There's beyond reasonable doubt. So and it's horrific. And I think what's keeping her in prison is the fact that so many officials will be publicly embarrassed for making mistakes. And that is not a reason for keeping someone in prison. Likewise, this ongoing debate will be upsetting the parents and the families. But again, not questioning an unsafe conviction again is not a reason just to keep someone in prison, just to, you know, as an excuse, let's stop upsetting the families. They're already upset, and this really probably could have been prevented had a proper investigation done without bias from the very outset. It would never reach court. Maybe an inquest, maybe there would have been more coronial inquests required, but it would never reach a criminal court because the threshold is not there. So my position is it's an unsafe conviction, and the evidence is showing that Lucy Letby is likely innocent, and that wrong needs to be righted.
Yeah, I agree entirely. So thank you. So that's the end of the interview for today.
Okay?
It's been absolutely brilliant. I know people are going to be so appreciative of this. I'd like to just finally just thank you for speaking out and showing the courage to do this, because I know you've been through a lot and it can't be easy to feel the police bearing down on you. And we're all like, everyone that cares about Lucy's case and cares about this, what I believe to be an egregious miscarriage of justice, is really grateful for what you've done. So I just wanted to make sure that I expressed that really on behalf of everyone, I think.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me today. As I say, it's been brilliant, and hopefully we can get you back in a month,
Okay.
and we can go over some more stuff. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. So
Yeah. Thank you.
thanks very much, and I'll speak to you again soon.
All right then. Thank you.
Cheers.
Take care.